Okay, so we've got a debris bin here. So any large bits of wood, Coke bottles, anything like that that comes out of a gully, that's the place to put it. And you've got a drop down door on the front with a couple of cleat pins. So used to be up there once upon a time, but it's been now moved to the back end of the machine, which is more sensible. Does the job very well. So that's our debris bin. Door clamps, which we're going to get back to a little bit later on. 2 on this side, 2 on the other side, and we'll go through the procedure for opening the door in one of the later videos. You've got the sight glass that you can see there that shows you how much is actually in the tank. Only really effective from sort of 3/4 all the way to full. You can get a sight glass below this one if you wanted to. The problem with a lower sight glass is the fact that it'll fill up with debris quite quickly and you're forever cleaning them, so it's not really worth having one, to be honest with you. The top one does the job just as well. Okay, coming down a little bit further, we've got the inline PRV on the other side, which we had a look at earlier with the keyring, which I pulled. This is the secondary one. Well, this really is the primary cutout. And it sits right at the top of the tank, and by pulling on this cable you should be able to see the lever moving at the top, so we know that that one's working as well. So it's very, very important that both the PRVs are checked prior to going anywhere, so you've got a backup really. The one that normally goes first is the inline one on the other side, and then this is the extra one. If that one's not coping, then the other one will open again, which is this one here. So that's working okay at the moment. If either of those wasn't working, then technically the vehicle is defective and you shouldn't be using it. Right, secondary hose reel. Again, repeater gauge, jet pump pressure gauge. So this is the same as the one on the back, but when you're operating the secondary hose reel, you can see what pressure you've got. You've got your increased pressure and decreased pressure buttons on the blue. You've got your jet pump start and stop, and you've got your reel supply open, reel supply closed. You've also got a soft start for the lance. In effect, what this does, if you were single crewed as such and you were operating this hose reel with a lance, you can start your jet pump, open your reel supply, press the yellow button, and then walk away with your hose. And as you squeeze the trigger, the pressure will gently start to build up to a predetermined level, which is normally around 100 bar. If it's a 2-man operation or a 2-person operation, then you don't need to worry too much about the yellow button, because the person that's actually on the buttons, when you're at the required distance, can start the jet pump, open the reel, and then bring the pressure up for you. So that's really just a soft start for the lance. This is the blow down lever, which we use to blow any water out of the hose. So if we're winterizing the vehicle and we want to get all the water out of everything, we're going to drain all the water out the jet pump, maybe empty the water out the front tank. We're going to then blow the water out of the hoses by using this lever. The vehicle engine has to be running, and it's quite a simple thing to do. We make sure that the hose is open-ended, pull a bit of the hose out, we'd open the hose reel and then flick the lever up. You've got to have at least 8 bar air pressure. So the vehicle needs to be running, ticking over for a little while to maintain that pressure in order for you to blow the hoses out, or blow this hose out. The same procedure is used on the rear hose. We press the reel supply button on the rear control panel, and we use this lever to blow the water out of the main hose on the back. And we do the same thing if the vehicle's got boom jets, which this one has. We've got a little lever underneath here for boom jets. So we will push that lever up and again flick the lever up on the secondary hose reel control panel, and that will blow any water out that's left in the boom. So you've got your jets nice and clear, then they're not going to freeze up. Right, this is a manually operated hose reel with a locking pin. So the locking pin is underneath there, so if I pull the locking pin out and turn it through 90 degrees, it should stay in the out position. And then I can pull the hose reel off. And you can see it's a brand new hose on here, which has been tested and certified. Okay, so when we want to reel it back in, it's dead easy. Now there is a situation that you can get if we were doing any small jetting operations with a small jetting nozzle on here. Sometimes if we've got maybe a little bit too much pressure on, you can get to a situation where the hose runs away, okay, because it's not hydraulic. And for that reason we have a brake fitted, which is behind the panel. So what you do is gently wind the brake on, and there's a little rubber bung on the end there, and that just rubs against the hose, or the hook rubs against the drum. And the idea then is put a bit of restriction over, give it a little bit more. You can actually see it's rubbing on the drum itself. So we don't use that to lock the drum down. What we use it for really is to slow the drum down. Okay. So quite a useful device. Not many people are aware that it's there. And you can actually tighten it up to a point where you won't be able to move the drum at all. So it's now locked in, but it's not designed for that feature. The feature it's designed for is to stop the hose from overrunning. So to lock the pin back in place, you just turn it back through 90 degrees and it should lock into its pin. So if I keep turning, it's now locked in, and that's what we need for travelling. We've got our lance or gun holster just here, so we can put the gun in. If the machine was supplied with one, that's where it would live, and this obviously this hose would be connected to the handle on the gun. A tray at the bottom there to put stuff in. Be aware with trays nowadays, if you have got stuff in the trays, and this one or the one underneath, they need to be secured. It's not unusual for drivers now to be stopped by the police for having an insecure load, simply because the stuff's just led on the top, so it must be secured if you've got it in the trays. Jet pump, okay, different oil. Don't get confused with the vacuum pump. So the total loss lubrication system on the vacuum pump is 1540 standard motor oil. The oil that goes in this pump is EP90. So to check the oil level, you've got a dipstick built into the filler cap. So what we do is very gently, and you've got to be very careful with this because it's a plastic thread going into an aluminium body. Very carefully pull the dipstick out and check the oil level. Okay, and you can see the oil on there. It's just between the two marks, so that's telling us that the oil level is good. If it's all white and emulsified, it means that there's water getting into the oil, there's a seal gone or something gone wrong with the pump, and you really shouldn't be using the pump. So that looks fine at the moment. This is the bit you need to be very careful with. Try not to cross thread, because it's a plastic cap and an aluminium body. So a couple of turns backwards first, make sure it seats properly, and then you should be able to get it started. It's never easy. That's it. Okay, so we're happy with what we've got so far. There's also a sight glass on this jet pump. Sometimes that's easier to see. Right down here where my finger is, there's a sight glass, and if the oil level is shown between the two lines, or halfway or just slightly above, then that gives you a good idea of how much oil is actually in the jet pump. I prefer to look at the sight glass, in all honesty, rather than take the dipstick out. So we're happy with the oil level. Everything looks pretty good there so far. This is the three-way block, or the three-way valve. This is what we use to open and close the door and to raise and lower the tank, and we'll be looking at that in a separate video a little bit later on. Another control panel up this side, so we can again start and stop the vacuum pump, open, close the boom valve, and also operate what we call the interconnecting valve. So when we operate this button, it transfers water from the front tank into the back tank. Remember, you've got your water for your jetting operations in the front tank, and you've got the space at the back for your load. So the division on this machine is sometimes not easy to see. I can just about see it, it's there. So that's where the division is. This is your low water warning sensor. So I can see the division there, So from this bit forward, that's your clean water for your jetting, and from that point to the back of the machine is where you'd store your dirty load. Okay, now on an MVC, medium volume combination, you've got space at the front for 800 gallons of water with 1,000 gallon capacity at the back of the machine. If it's a high volume machine, it's the other way around. 1,000 gallons at the front of clean water and only 800 space at the back for your dirty water. But this is an MVC. You can tell that by the size of the pump. If it was a HVC machine, high volume machine, it would be a bigger pump. So going back to the pump, we've got a drain valve here, okay, which we're going to open in a moment. We're going to check the filter to make sure that's okay. The filter itself is tucked up behind the hand wash unit. So that's the inline filter for the jet pump, and we need to check this regularly to make sure this is nice and clean. We've got water in the front tank already, and we can see that on the sight glass. So if you have a look at the sight glass at the front here, you can see that it's well over, almost full to capacity with water in the front tank. So we don't want to waste that, we want to keep that for jetting a little bit later on. So what we're going to do is shut the isolation valve, which is this one, and we're going to open the drain valve on the bottom of the jet pump, which is this one. The water will spill into the tray, but we've got cutouts in the corner of each tray, of the tray. So that's going to allow the water to come out. Now it's going to only dribble out very slowly for a while until we start undoing the filter, then it's going to go a little bit quicker. Now sometimes it's easy to get to the filters, other times it's not so easy. The boom doesn't help because of the way it's positioned. I might be able to get my hand on it, and I can, which is great. And I've just cracked it open slightly, and you should see the water now draining out of the jet pump. Once that flow stopped, then we can start taking the filter out properly, but I don't like getting wet. So that's good enough. I can start taking the filter all the way out now. If I bring the filter up, we can have a look at it. So it's just a plastic filter, a little bit of debris in the bottom there which we can tip away. Doesn't look too bad. Remember, this is a mild steel tank, so you're going to get a little bit of rust in, but that doesn't look too bad. This can be washed. A little bit of rust in there, even though it's a brand new machine, we still get a little bit of rust, but that's pretty good, to be honest with you, and it looks pretty good inside there as well. Now if you're going to winterize the machine, don't put that back in. You might want to drain all the water out the main tank through your resealer valves. Remember, you've got one on that side and you've got one on this side, so this is the other resealer valve. If we open both of these valves, we can drain all the water out of that tank fairly quickly. We don't want to do that today because we want it for some jetting operations a bit later on. So by leaving the filter out, draining all the water out, you've got all the water out the system, but you haven't got the water out of the main hose or the secondary hose, and that's the next bit that we're going to have a look at in the next video.